My name is Savannah Brooke Calloway, and I need to tell you something before this story even begins. I am not a victim. I want to be real clear about that, because what I'm about to share is going to sound like the kind of thing that only happens in movies. But it happened. Every single bit of it. Right here in Greenville, South Carolina, on a cold December night, in a house I paid for, at a table I fed, surrounded by people who looked me dead in the face and told me I wasn't welcome there anymore. By the next morning, they understood what that house actually cost. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up the middle child in a family where the middle meant invisible. My older brother Derek was the golden boy, the athlete, the one my daddy bragged about at church. My younger sister Tanya was the baby, sweet-faced and sharp-tongued, and allergic to anything that resembled personal accountability. And then there was me, Savannah, the one who handled things, the one who figured it out, the one who didn't complain. I joined the United States Army at 19. Not because I was running from something, because I wanted to build something. And over the next 17 years, I did exactly that. I deployed twice. I got promoted. I sacrificed holidays and relationships and sleep and comfort and years of my life that I will never get back. I became a staff sergeant, then a master sergeant. Every rank earned the hard way. Nobody handed me a thing. Meanwhile, back in Greenville, my family was slowly coming apart at the seams. My daddy had always been a proud man. Too proud to admit when he was drowning. About 14 years ago, he made a business decision so bad that I'm still not entirely sure how he talked himself into it. He invested our family savings, all of it, into a franchise restaurant with a partner who disappeared 6 months later with half the capital. The house went into foreclosure. My mama was calling me crying at 2 in the morning from a base in Germany. I didn't hesitate. I wired money. I hired an attorney. I paid off the mortgage arrears and restructured the entire note. Then, because I didn't trust the situation to stay stable, I had my name placed on the deed. Not out of control, out of protection. The attorney explained it clearly to both my parents at the time. Daddy nodded and signed. Mama asked a few questions and signed. Then they both went on with their lives and, apparently, forgot every word of that conversation ever happened. That house became mine on paper. Every tax bill, every insurance renewal, every major repair. I handled it. The roof in 2016. The HVAC in 2019. A plumbing disaster the winter before last that cost more than most people's cars. I never once complained. I never once held it over their heads. I just paid it and moved on. I also bought 2 vehicles, one for Mama, one for Daddy. Both titled in my name. Both insured under my policy. Use them as long as you need, I told them. That was the whole conversation. Then there was Tanya. Lord, where do I even start with Tanya? Tanya had never held a job longer than 8 months. She had a talent, a genuine, almost impressive talent, for being in someone else's crisis at exactly the right moment to avoid dealing with her own life. Her apartment deposits, 2 of them over the years. Her credit card debt that she swore she'd pay back. A car repair bill in 2021 that turned into something much larger once the mechanic got involved. Emergency medical bills from the time she waited so long to see a doctor that a routine thing became a serious thing. All of it came back to me, and I paid it. Every time. Because she was my sister. And that's what you do for family, right? That's what I believed for a long time. Christmas Eve arrived the way it always does, in South Carolina, cold but not brutal. The air smelling like wood smoke and pine needles. Lights strung up on every house on the block. I drove down from Fort Bragg that afternoon, 3.5 hours, because I had finally managed to get leave approved and I was determined to have one good holiday. One. That was all I was asking for. Mama had cooked for 2 days. The house smelled amazing. The table was beautiful. For about 45 minutes, everything was genuinely fine. We ate. We laughed a little. Daddy told a story I'd heard 4 times before, and I smiled like it was new. I was trying. I really was. Then Tanya opened her mouth. She'd been drinking wine since before I arrived. I noticed it when I walked in and chose not to say anything. That was my first mistake. It started small, the way it always does. A little comment about how I never visit. How I missed Derek's birthday last spring. How I always make everything about my career. I let it go. I always let it go. Then she leaned across the table, wine glass in hand, and said, and I am not exaggerating a single word, the Army didn't make you a better person, Savannah. It just made you think you're better than us. The table went quiet. I looked at her. I don't think I'm better than anyone. You act like it. She set down her glass harder than she needed to. You come in here once a year with your little uniform stories and everyone's supposed to bow down. Tanya. Mama's voice. Soft. Warning. No. I'm serious. Tanya stood up. She thinks because she sends money that we all owe her something, Like we should be grateful. Like we can't survive without her. Here's the thing about a moment like that. There's a version of me that would have stayed calm, that would have breathed through it, eaten my sweet potato pie, and driven back to Fort Bragg with another holiday quietly buried in the pile of all the others. But then my daddy put his fork down and said, "She's got a point, Savannah. You do have a way of making people feel small." I looked at him for a long time. I said, "Daddy, this house, the cars you drive, do you have any idea?" "Don't." He pointed at me across the table. "Don't you dare sit in my house and throw money in my face." And that's when Tanya stepped around the table. I saw it coming about a half second before it happened. The slap caught me right across the cheek, hard enough to knock my head sideways. My water glass tipped. Somebody gasped. I sat there for one full second with my hand pressed to my face, just completely still. Then Daddy pushed back his chair and said the words I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Get out of my house. And don't come back." Not my house. His house. My house. I stood up. I picked up my coat off the hook by the door. I walked outside into the cold, and I sat in my truck in the driveway for a while, not crying, just thinking. Thinking about 17 years. Thinking about all those 2 a.m. phone calls where I wired money and asked no questions. Thinking about the Christmas I spent in a tent overseas while they were all sitting around that same table opening presents. Then I called my attorney, Marcus Webb, who I have trusted with every significant financial decision for the past 11 years. He answered on the second ring. "Savannah." He could hear something in my voice immediately. I looked at the house through the windshield. Yellow light glowing warm through every window. The house I owned. The house I'd just been told to leave. "Marcus," I said. "It's time to start the process." He didn't ask me if I was sure. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't be calling at 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve if I wasn't. "I'll start paperwork first thing in the morning," he said. "Merry Christmas, Marcus." "Merry Christmas, Savannah." The next morning, my father's phone started ringing at 8:15. Marcus doesn't believe in waiting. He had been preparing for this possibility quietly for over 2 years, on my instruction. For exactly this kind of situation. Not because I had planned to use it, because I had learned from the army, from life, that preparation isn't pessimism. It's wisdom. The first notice went to my parents. Property ownership confirmation. Deed records. Insurance policy termination effective 30 days out. Occupancy agreement, which had been a real document they'd signed years earlier without fully reading, formally terminated with legally required notice. The second notice covered the vehicles. Both of them. My daddy called me at 8:30. "No good morning. No how are you. Just what the hell is this?" I was in a diner 20 minutes from base, drinking coffee and watching the sun come up over the parking lot. "The ownership notice?" I said. "You can't do this." His voice was shaking. "I can. This is our home." "No, Daddy. It's my home. It's been my home for 14 years. Marcus explained this to both of you. When I restructured the mortgage, you signed the paperwork. The silence that followed was different from other silences I'd heard from him. This one had weight. Like something settling. Like the first moment when a person begins to understand that the story they've been telling themselves isn't true. Then he said, and I will never forget this, "You owe this family. Not thank you. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong to do what I did last night. You owe this family." I closed my eyes, took one slow breath. "No," I said, "I really don't." And I hung up. Tanya called 6 times before noon. I didn't answer any of them. The texts came through in waves, dramatic, frantic, accusatory. The last one read, "You're doing this over a disagreement? You've lost your mind." A disagreement. That was the word she used. Disagreement. The vehicle recovery happened 3 days later. My father's truck was collected by a licensed transport service on a Tuesday morning. According to my cousin Renee, who lived 3 houses down and saw the whole thing, he stood in the driveway in his robe, screaming at the driver for 20 minutes. The neighbors watched from their porches. He had called that truck his for 8 years. He had told people at church he bought it himself. Mama's car went the following afternoon. That one hurt me more than I expected. Not because I regretted it. Because my mother isn't a cruel woman. Her worst quality has always been her silence, the way she watches something wrong happen and tells herself that keeping the peace is the same thing as being good. It isn't. But she's not mean. She's just afraid. She called me that evening, and her voice was so small I almost didn't recognize it. "Emily," she started, then caught herself. "Savannah. Honey. Mama. I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know how much of it was you. I know you didn't. I should have known." And the thing is, she was right. She should have. But I also understood, maybe for the first time, that not knowing had been easier. Knowing would have required gratitude. Knowing would have required her to have harder conversations with my daddy and my sister than she ever wanted to have. So she chose not to ask. And I chose not to force the answer. And we had ended up here. We can talk? I told her. When you're ready? Just us. She cried then. Quietly. And I let her. Tanya showed up at my apartment 2 weeks later. I almost didn't open the door. When I did, she looked like someone had taken all the air out of her. The confidence was gone. The smirk was gone. All of it just gone. What was left looked an awful lot like a 34-year-old woman realizing for the first time that she was going to have to build her own life. She walked in without being invited, which was very Tanya, and she turned around in my living room and said, "You've destroyed everything." "I haven't destroyed anything," I said. "I stopped paying for things that weren't mine to keep paying for. There are parents. They're my parents too." That didn't stop them from pointing at the door. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then, quiet as I'd ever heard her, she said, "I looked at the records Marcus sent over. The tuition payments. My first apartment." She stopped. "That was you?" "Yes. Mom and Dad always said they." "I know what they said." Another silence. Longer this time. Then, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because I wanted you to love me, not be grateful to me." "There's a difference." I paused. "But you can't have neither," she cried. Not the dramatic kind, the real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old. I handed her a box of tissues and I let her sit there and feel it. She left about an hour later, and something small but real had shifted. My daddy was the last. Months passed. Spring came. The house situation was resolved. My parents moved into a rental in a quieter neighborhood. Smaller, but affordable. Theirs in the sense that actually mattered. Mama and I talked every week. Tanya got a job, a real one, and called me one night just to say her feet hurt, and she laughed about it and I laughed too, and it was the most normal we'd ever been with each other. Daddy was silent. I had stopped expecting anything when, one Saturday in April, a truck I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb outside my place. He stepped out slow. He looked older, the way people do when life finally catches up to what they've been avoiding. He walked up the driveway and stood a few feet away from me, and neither of us said a word for a long time. Then he looked at the ground and back up at me and said, "I owe you an apology." Just like that. I didn't speak. "I was wrong," he said. That night. And before that night. For a long time before that. He swallowed hard. "I should have protected you. I should have been grateful. I wasn't either of those things. And I'm sorry." I had imagined hearing those words many times. I thought they'd feel like winning. They didn't. They felt like grief. Like looking at something real that came 17 years too late. Like loving someone and being sad about them at the same time. "I know," I said. His eyes were wet. My daddy, who I had never once seen cry, standing in my driveway in April with tears running down his face. "I failed you," he said. "Yeah," I said. "You did." And then I stepped forward and hugged him. Not because everything was fine, not because I had forgotten, but because I am tired of carrying things that were never mine to carry alone. And because forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person. It's something you do so you can finally put it down. He held on longer than I expected. When he pulled back, he looked at me for a moment. Then said quietly, "Thank you. For everything. All of it. All those years." I nodded. I watched him walk back to his truck, and standing in the driveway with the April sun on my face, I felt something I had been chasing my whole life without knowing what to call it. Peace. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I would do it differently. And here is my honest answer. I don't regret the decision. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that 17 years of love had to become a legal document before anyone paid attention. I regret that my family needed to lose comfort before they could find truth. But I don't regret stopping. Because here is what I know now, that I didn't fully understand back then. Taking care of people who don't respect you isn't love. It's disappearing. And you can disappear slowly for so long that one day you look in the mirror and realize you've been gone for years. I'm back now. And I'm not going anywhere. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been the one who carries everyone else, or if you've ever been thrown out of a place you built, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you held on to and what you finally let go. I read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome. Subscribe. We have so many more stories to share. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to know that setting a boundary isn't cruelty. Walking away isn't weakness. And the most important thing you will ever protect is your own dignity.